Thank you for coming for this screening. I've been wanting to do a program like this since we opened. And even if I hadn't wanted to do it, Barbara Moss would have forced me into. So I am really very happy that, as a founder of the Women Preservation Fund, she's here to introduce this program dedicated to early pioneers of, women filmmaking, of the pioneers. And it's a slice of film history that it's still not known enough, for sure. And this is just a small taste, but I'm very happy that we could give it to you. And here's Barbara.
Oh, I have to hold this. Okay, I have to do two things at once. Sorry for the delay, and I'm going to try to edit this so we can get to the films as quickly as possible. But first, I do have to thank Giulia because, yes, 3 years, and here we are. Thank you, Giulia, for inviting the Women's Film Preservation Fund. And I want to thank everybody in the staff of the cinema. As you know, it's such a, and our sponsors and everyone, because it's such a gem to be here. I would like my few of the many women who over 25 years has made this possible. Just raise your hands so they know you're here. These are the women in film who've made it possible. So they're here if you want to ask them any questions at all. One thing I want to say about preservation, only one thing, and if you can come tomorrow morning, it's an amazing thing to hear the stories of what preservation is. Preservation is difficult, it's expensive, and it involves an army of people just like making films. You have archivists, curators, collectors, programmers, you name it, we have it here. And tomorrow morning, the best of the best will be here, so I hope you'll come. Now on to our program. Today you're going to see in this program are 8 films, but 5 women that you will come to know. Last night, when we were all here to see Spellbound, is the gentleman from Disney here by any chance? No, but he, are you here? Your introduction was so stunning, and it just proved to me the more we know, the more exciting it becomes. But I have 8 films here, so I'm gonna move very quickly. Forgive me, I can't give, but thank you so much. It was extraordinary. And I think one of the films you're going to see something common to the issue. Can I see how many of you here have ever gone to a silent film? Oh, this is great. How many have gone to a silent film with live music accompaniment? Hey, this is even better. Thank you so much. Well, I just want to set in the history of where we're at with these women. As you know, over in France, 1895, Lumière, Méliès, they were all doing work together because it was Gaumont who started the production of a existing production company that's still there. He hired a young woman as a stenographer. Her name was Alice Guy Blanchet. There may be a picture of her up here, I'm not sure. Alice Guy was struggling to support her family. She became fascinated with this camera that was being developed, and she was the one who turned to Gaumont and said, there's more to this than just watching people do daily activities. She was actually present at the premiere of Lumière's The Workers Leaving the Factory, and she turned to Gaumont and said, I believe there's more to this than a camera. And he said, that's fine. I've checked this. It's not just apocryphal, as long as it doesn't get in the way of your office duties. So the history is that she started making films in France. She met her husband there. His name was Herbert Blanchet. And they came to America to represent Gaumont over here in America. I'm trying to move fast here. Lillian Gish had a quote that I think is beautiful about what was it like to be in the silence. She said, performing was very freeing. There were no constraints. The silence were like Esperanto for the eyes. It was not just pantomime, but it's something that was wonderfully expressive. So there was a freedom to the silence, which, by the way, were never silent. And that's something we've talked about a lot for this program, which is in the big movie palaces, there were magnificent orchestras that rivaled. There were palaces of 6,000 seat, but then the small towns had like clunky piano players or violinists. So along with that and preservation, just like good films and bad films, there's bad preservation, right? And there's good preservation. So sometimes, and I think Giulia made some choices today with me that you will see the silence with no music, because better to have no music than hear bad music. So that's what I'm just saying in terms of that. So the first women in film, Alice Guy Blanchet's Mixed Pets. She, you know, I was looking at all the kind of adjectives that I kept coming across for these women, and I thought, oh, this is going to be boring. But each woman in their own way were fearless, bold, and definitely innovative. And there will be techniques that you'll see that really were the first time that they were used. Who's that? Oh, that's Grace Kennard. So over here in America, when she started her own company, Alice Guy Blanchet and her husband actually set up shop in Flushing. And you know, the center of filmmaking was Fort Lee, New Jersey and Flushing. And she opened up her studio called Solac Studios, which on the intertitles you will see. And they built a studio in the year 1910, $100,000 invested in her own studio. So she really is one of the first. Now, when you see Mixed Pets, it's really a beautiful expression of what she stood for. It is funny, and it mixes babies and puppies, things you're supposed to avoid. And even though it's a comedy that you will see in many films, there is a touch that you will see is a touch of her comedic sense that is very clever. And the intertitles do not bog you down. The next woman you're going to see with her film that I think is remarkable given what some of us saw last night, that is, there was Griffith, there was DeMille, there was Chaplin, and then there was Lois Weber. I don't know if any of you have heard of her, but she became the highest paid writer-director in Hollywood in 1916. She was hired by Carl Laemmle to come to Universal. He was an extreme feminist, and there were many, many women in Universal, and they were called the Universal Women. This film that you're about to see is a remarkable vision. It's called Suspense. And if you saw Spellbound last night, I am telling you that there were sequences that you will see that she in 1912, you'll see in Suspense. She was one of the most controversial women filmmakers, but she could be called a titan by all means. She made a 10-minute film every week. Imagine that output. She also had a husband that became known, the team became known as the Smallies, but it was a best-kept secret in Hollywood, that she was really the one directing as often as her husband. She was well known for expressing very controversial subjects, including abortion, eugenics, capital punishment. Needless to say, and there is a shot up here of one of her most controversial films where she showed nudity for the first time in a film called Hypocrite. And she said, I grew up in a business when everybody was so busy learning their particular branch of the new industry that no one had any time to notice whether it was a woman or not gaining a foothold. That is Suspense, the second film you will see. The third film, Purple Mask, Grace Kennard. Oh, by the way, don't you love all the hats that you see? Grace Kennard was the youngest. The span of these women, the youngest was 23, the oldest was 43. Grace Kennard was all of 24 when you see her film called The Purple Mask. She was matched, or she worked with none other than Francis Ford, who was John Ford's older brother. They were well known in Hollywood, and actually, the marketing promoted them. They were not husband and wife, but they worked very closely. Her work, as you will see, is never was a damsel in distress. Their partnership lasted through what you're about to see here really was the beginning. Correct me if I'm wrong on this. Her film Purple Mask was part of an episodic series. It was a serial, right. And it was the binge watching of the day. Patrons would go and want to see this very badly. And by the way, the same way that Silence were run, this is about to run this show, which is Patrons would come to the theater when they wanted. It was not a start time and a finish time. It's just they would walk in the theater and they would wait for a break and they'd go in and see what film they wanted to see. So that's how people can break. So that was the binge watching of the day. And she said, the fact is I love acting and I'm awfully fond of writing. As to directing, she says, I will never give up motion pictures. I am too wrapped up in them. I think we all know that. So The Purple Mask, as you will see, is the number 9 of the serial, and there were 112 of these serials at the time. Next, coming up, will be Helen Holmes. Remarkable. You will see Hazards of Helen. She was a 24-year-old young woman, not a beauty, but her athletic ability led her to her big break. It was a successful box office because she was the heroic female. She grew up in a household. Her father worked in the railroad, and she created what's called the thrilly actions. At the time with suffragettes, The Perils of Pauline came out. You may have heard of that with Pearl White. And as typical of Hollywood, when that was so successful, along came The Hazards of Helen. And wait till you see the hazard she put herself in. She said, I don't mind hanging over bridges and jumping from horses back to runway engines. It's rather fun. But what I hate is wearing those greasy overalls. Some days I look forward to appearing in a photoplay where I can wear the most scrumptious clothes. She truly, truly put herself in danger. She almost burned alive once, and she almost killed a child in one of the shoots, but they managed to get through. So she was never a damsel in distress. Then comes along Angela Murray Gibson. You're going to see 2 of her films called Adam's Boys and That Ice Ticket. Angela's probably the least of the known, but most fascinating. She was discovered by a collector who I've come to know, Bucky Grimm, and it was found actually in a trunk on one of these really amazing. He became fascinated with who were the women that were working as camera maids, crank maids. There were a number of them. He's collected the picture and he's writing a history of them. She was one of them. She was a young woman from North Dakota, and she decided she wanted to return to her homeland of Scotland to do research. She came home, and her sister, who owned a very successful dress shop, paid for her to put together a beautiful Scottish musical. None other than Mary Pickford was making the film The Pride of the Clan. She heard about this woman. She brought her to Hollywood. Can you imagine? And she stood there and was a consultant for Pride of the Clan. And then she went on to make her films in North Dakota, opening up her own studio. And she was well known as the home ec teacher who became a famous director. And the last 2 films, which are they're difficult films. And I know you're not supposed to give away the punchline, but I'm going to. Right, Giulia? I think you're not supposed to do. They're called Matrimony, Speed Limit, and Fool and His Money. And it was also by Alice Guy Blaché. Matrimony, Speed Limit was very controversial. Very funny. It's very much about relationships, what Alice Guy Blaché was known for. But she did something remarkable. Apparently, and someone correct me if I'm wrong, there certainly was dissension when white cast members were asked to work with black cast members. Now, she made this film, Matrimony Speed Limit, in 1913, which was the year after the last film you're going to see, A Fool and His Money, which has the first all African-American cast. But in Matrimony Speed Limit, you watch for it. This is the story of a man who's trying to get rich quick when he's told, if you get married in 12 minutes, if you find the right mate in 12 minutes, you will get a big prize. But meanwhile, he had a woman who really wanted him. He's running around asking everybody to marry him. The last woman he comes to, all the women say no. The last woman says yes. He lifts the veil. And there you will see the face of a white actor wearing a black face, which was not unusual. Yet, she made a film the year before called A Fool and His Money, which some of my friends here find it very difficult to watch as racist. But Ava DuVernay said something very interesting. It is an all African-American cast, and it is a story of a black man who kind of screws things up. So it's not making him look very responsible, but there are also other very elegant people in the film. And in that, Ava DuVernay said this, is what I want you to think about when you see it. I think it helped me. It's the last thing I'm going to say. I thought it was interesting to. Well, basically, she said it wasn't a progressive film, but you have to look at it in the context of the time and understand what it meant to see black cinema. So there was a qualification for it. So that is Fool and His Money, and that's it. So we can start the show.